Hello everyone, I hope you can hear me. Welcome to the stream, nice to see you all here. Was, I guess, a long time that the last lore stream was on this channel. Yeah, exactly a month. So I did not keep my promise to stream 2 times a month this month, I guess, except I would stream tomorrow again. But yeah, that might be a bit much though. But yeah, thank you all for joining. And I already just I saw the first question. So, oh boy, that's potentially not an easy to answer question. So looked a bit into at least where I can find stuff about it, but that is a very specific question. So awesome to have you here. Sorry for being late as always, but I guess you should be used to me being late. At times, again and again. It's a bit unfortunate, I have to admit. But, yeah, I hope sound is good. People had some technical issues in the past days. And often the sound wouldn't sound so... like there was some stuff, like I was cut off or something because my noise gate is cut off. Interestingly, in this setup here, I don't have my noise gate set up, so... there shouldn't be any problems, I guess. Okay, good to know. Well, that is good at least. So I hope you had a fantastic day. And yeah, people can just post their questions in chat. I hope we get a few interesting questions that are somewhat easy to answer. And I like those the most, but I guess people also like the extreme stuff, the unusual stuff, the lore parts that are a bit difficult. For today's Q&A stream, I chose like a picture of good old fractured Narsil, the sort of Elendil, and yeah, I don't know, it's kind of interesting choosing a picture when you don't know what questions are coming up for the stream, so I just have to come up with something. Last time I wanted to talk about dwarves, but that never really happened. Potentially this might go in the same direction this time, but I find it interesting that according to the Silmarillion, I think at least it was, yeah, Silmarillion of the Rings in Power in the Third Age, I think you could interpret how the phrasing that Narsil got its name during the War of the Last Alliance, but that's just my interpretation of it. I think I also briefly talk about this in the Elrond video part 2 somewhere in it. I hope also I'm not too quiet on sound, else I could maybe beef it up a little bit if you want. But I hope you can hear me loud and clearly. So let's start with some questions. Like, I'm not looking... yeah, it's a difficult... it's really a difficult question. So, yeah. Also, shoutouts to Raphael. He's always here when I stream. And nice to see so many other people here. Okay, so Raphael Gustavo asks, what are the gods of Nan Dungorthin, other than Melkor and the Valar? Sound is good. Awesome. Also welcome, Kirdan. Nice to see you here. My trusty moderator. Always good to have one here around. So, maybe some people might wonder already. Let me just see if I can find it. To be honest, I have trouble seeing it myself here in this size, so I have to get the map a bit bigger. So we are in the First Age. Let me just see if I can bring it on screen. So, as you're all aware of, in the First Age we have an addition to the west coast of Middle-earth called Beleriand. And in there is a place that is usually called Nan Dungorthep. And in an old version, I think it is, well, I'm pretty sure, I hope it is, it's the Book of Lost Tales Part 2. And the Book of Lost Tales is potentially Tolkien's oldest writings, and everything in there is still more based on, let's say, when Tolkien's plan was to create a mythology for England. I guess it's hard to say if he ever gave up on this plan, but in some letters he calls this endeavor ridiculous, so maybe he changed his view over the upcoming years. It's quite difficult. And there in this book, a lot of names are different, a lot of things are different. Like, just imagine the Silmarillion and it's M211 or something like this. It's just it's very interesting to read. I have to say, it's a long time that I read through these books, so my knowledge about some details in them is not there. But just for example, there were many more Balrogs in these versions, if I remember correctly. Some of the Valar had children, interestingly, and there are also some, as a result, there are some interesting deities around the world. I think there's like 2 brothers or twins even, and they have power over time and space or something like this. It's really fascinating what you find in these old books. But interestingly, even though this is the Silmarillion amped up to 11, you could think it's very different. But it is very different, but it's also very familiar. Like, you see all the connections there. And then there is like the mention of Dumgorthim, or however it's spelled there. I have to really look that up. So I hope I'm lucky, maybe not. And yeah, so basically my answer to this would be in short, like, I think there is a mention that there is offspring of Ungoliant in this region too, and Ungoliant is also like a strange deity out of this world, and there is like a mention, maybe I can find it in the book itself, but I don't know if that might be the case. Sadly, I should have used my index book, but yeah, it's always difficult to find specific details like these. Maybe somebody can post a quote if he has the book better in his mind. But it's always, let me see. Glade northward region of that was called afterward Dumgorthim with an M. It's written, yeah. The land of the dark idols, and here we have this. But that is a matter that concerns not this tale. So it's again one of these. If we look at this sentence, let me just maybe read it completely. Where do I start? It's a really long sentence, I have to say. Now goes he with many dogs through the woods, hunting orcs and thanes of TPhLore, and many herds he got thus, and many of them he slew or put to fear and flight, until one even at dusk the Valar brought him to a glade in that northward region of Artanor. That was called afterward Dumgorthim, the land of the dark idols, but that is a matter that concerns not this tale. So that is one of the quotes from the Book of Lost Tales, where we find a mention of dark idols. It's not the dark gods, but maybe they are potentially related to this. It's quite interesting. I think there's another quote somewhere. There are not many quotes, to be honest, on these gods. And if you, for example, maybe I would like to check the other quotes first, just to go a bit through this thing here. Might be difficult to find though. Okay, still you have the elves of Artor, gnomes. They're also the in the widest sense, the Noldor elves were called gnomes at this time. Still, it's kind of interesting detail about it. So don't wonder if you go through this book that all the names are. Some names are interestingly very similar, like Turgon of Gondolin, Beren is already there. Some relations are different than we know them from the Silmarillion, though. Really difficult to find. It's really hard to find sometimes the stuff. But if we, for example, simply think of the Hobbit, that's maybe a really good comparison. I don't have the Hobbit opened here in the background, so let me just see if I find the quote really quick. I can read you. Yeah, for example, we take this. Tell me what you want done, and I will try it. If I have to walk from here to the east of east and to the east of east and fight with wild werewolves in the last desert. So we never ever heard again about the werewolves in the last desert or what the last desert might be. Only that it's somewhere in the east. But even also we have the necromancer detail in the Hobbit book. So from my perspective, let me see, but I found him a prisoner in the dungeons of the necromancer. It's kind of interesting. We must give sword to the necromancer, don't be absurd. What else do we have? You would get into the land of the necromancer, and even you, okay. So there's multiple mentions, for example, of this last desert. We never heard again what's going on with it. So it could just be that sometimes Tolkien uses this, let's call it stylistic device, in the widest sense, that he puts details or describes, like he describes his world really, really detailed, and Tolkien's really good with this. And then he sometimes throws out like a little something beyond the boundaries of the actual story, if that makes sense. Like there's a necromancer, there is the last desert with werewolves in the far east, and so on. And if you, I guess, look into those details, you potentially often, like into some very specific details, you often don't really find, welcome, Nolorine. It's also very difficult, like it's really hard to find more information about this. In Lord of the Rings, we also have, for example, the guardian in front of the gates of the doors of Durin, the entry to Moria in the the west side, and so on. Like, what is that? We have the nameless things below Moria, and as a result, it becomes a bit not difficult, but they also make the world like bigger than it potentially actually is, and add some ingredient to it, like mystery to it. This here, though, is very deeply rooted mythology, and Tolkien. These texts are still from a very early date and time where Tolkien wanted to create mythology, and so it's very difficult to speculate about what is the exact nature of. And what's the exact nature of these these idols in this particular story? It could just be like Tolkien wanted to add something and say, yeah, there is more to this world. The world is actually bigger than in this story, even though it's not fleshed out outside. And interestingly, and that is the fascinating thing about Tolkien, very often things that Tolkien just mentioned are actually fleshed out. At least Tolkien wrote something about it. He just not dropped the name and never did anything with it. For example, the Blue Wizards. Originally, I think it was planned that they were part of the appendices. I'm not 100% sure on that, but something like this I have in mind. And we know from the Lord of the Rings that there are five there are 5 rods and 5 wizards. Basically, that is what the Lord of the Rings tells us, and we only know 3 of them, so there must be 2 more. And Tolkien, it was again somewhere in the east. There are 2 more wizards. It's not stated in the Lord of the Rings, but it was at least potentially planned that it was stated somewhere. So somewhere there are 2 more wizards, and Tolkien even wrote some. There are multiple versions of it, but Tolkien did not just say, yeah, there are 5 wizards, and never thought further than this. But there was actual material about it, and actually some interesting details. They have different names of them, We have like some really weird mention in some other weird, like the Nature of Middle-earth book just revealed 2 more names for the Blue Wizards, which I forgot. I think Hymenar and Palicano, something like this. So it's somewhat similar. These names never appeared again in any writings we know, so it's very fascinating stuff. And I think it's the same potentially with these deities that makes it very difficult to talk about. I'm not too familiar with this specific detail like this. If I would make a video, I would definitely have to read through the Book of Lost Tales in parts and try to find every mention of those. So I really just try to find something here that might give me a further hint. As I said, if somebody in the chat is like an absolute expert on the Book of Lost Tales, especially part 2, then maybe you know a good quote that maybe adds a bit to our discussion here, then feel free to post it in chat. But I guess it's really very specific question. I'm really looking through this page, try to scan it for certain words, but I can't find anything. Just looking it up a bit, I found these pages here. Oh, the spell of bottomless dread. Shoutouts to Voice of Geekdom. Not sure if he's here, probably not, but yeah, that was. They had an interview with Karl Hosstetter, who the editor of The Nature of Middle-earth, and he also talked a bit about Melkor and so on, and here in these books there is a mention of, and he mentioned that too, the spell of bottomless dread. It's also an interesting lore detail. I found it, at least this on this page. It's page 65 in page. The other thing was 35. Maybe I've got the page wrong. Maybe it was 62. No, it was 62. I'm on the wrong page. Okay, that explains why I don't find it. My number memory is sometimes really bad. Maybe I find it here. Mountains of Shadow. Tinuvion, northward region, Adator, that was called afterward Nam-Dungorthin, the land of dark idols, page 35. The Gnomish is defined as land of dark forest east of Adator, where the wooded mountain were hidden idols, where on a wooded mountain were hidden idols sacrificed to by some evil tribes of renegade men. Secret not to be spoken. Interesting. Yeah. Here's another section. I was on the wrong page. There the twain enfolded phantom twilight and dim mazes, dark, unholy, in none. Oh, here it's written with an N again. Dungorthin, where nameless gods have shrouded shrines in shadow's secret, more old than Morgoth, and all the ancient lords, the golden gods of the guarded west. But the ghostly dwellers of Grey Valley hindered nor heard them, and they held their course with creeping flesh and quaking limb. Yet laughter at whiles with lingering echo, as distant mockery of demon voices there, harsh and hollow in the hushed twilight, flindering, fancied, fell unwholesome. So here's like a section of, I think this is about Túrin and early version of the Lay of the Children of Húrin, which is really interesting. Does somebody know there's a book Children of Húrin of stuff from the Book of Lost? If this particular passage is also in it, that would be interesting to know. But that's a story definitely for like, I don't know, a different thing here. So yeah, it's also not. I showed on the map this place. It's really hard to say. like the Beleriand, this is a map derived from the Silmarillion. It might be the Silmarillion map. It might be. Let me just see if I spell this correctly. The map of a book of, it would be interesting. I'm not sure if there is something like this. The map of this book might look quite different. I'm also too stupid to spell Artanor. Let me just see. Okay, no. So yeah, as said, in case people wonder, Artanor was once Doriath, basically in this old version, which is a forest with King Thingol in it. So this is Doriath, and King Thingol. You have probably like the first king of the Sindar elves, with this interesting story. But as said, a lot of stories are quite different. So who could those people are? They're of course still the Valar and the and we have Morgoth, and sometimes they have children and so on in these versions. Not sure in particular about this specific version. But as said, I think the main intention is definitely that Tolkien wanted to add some mystery to this detail. So yeah, it's really a bit difficult to answer. So what could this be? We talked about mentioned Ungoliant already. That I think is also mentioned somewhere. That in this particular section, like in the Nan Dungorthep, is basically like around Doriath there was like the girdle of Melian and the power of Melian, the wife of Thingol, the first Sindar king. Clashed basically with the power of Morgoth, and his fortress was somewhere here up the north, Angband, and his dark power and his creatures basically spread down from there and hit Doriath basically. And Dungorthep was basically where these powers specifically met. And just to put a bit of context, what this is like, it's a dreadful valley. And there are some stories, for example, Arezel is lost there during journey in one version. Beren has to cross it, and so on. It's it's quite an interesting place that is mentioned a few times, and we know that there are very powerful entities like Ungoliant, for example, was in the process of eating Melkor in the Silmarillion. So we know there are some outside powers in some form that are not part of the Valar and not part of the Maiar. It's hard to say if this was Tolkien's intention here too. It's just speculation what this could be. If we, for example, think of the Barrow Downs from Lord of the Rings, we also have these weird entities, the Barrow Wights, and some speculate that it may be, I don't know, fallen Maiar spirits, leftovers. Maybe these were once, I don't know, elves or something. Maybe it's an interesting comparison. Let me see if I can find this really quick in the Lord of the Rings. Just a thought. Old Forest, Fox on the Barrow Downs. Let me see. I hope it's written. I hope it is written in things. It's Tom Bombadil. Yeah, so these Barrow Whites also had an what do you call it, chanting and incantation, I don't know. Could be hand and heart and bone, and cold be sleep under stone, never more to wake on stony bed, never till the sun fails and the moon is dead. In the black wind the stars shall die, and still on gold here let them lie, till the Dark Lord lifts his hand over dead sea and withered land. So there's also like, it's from its tone, this is also a bit unusual for Lord of the Rings, I would say. It's a little cool dark poem basically in the in Lord of the Rings. And yeah, I don't know, if we compare this to this here, we might, yeah, it's we also have like demon voices, mockery, and other the shadows, secret, nameless gods, and so on, and ghostly dwellers, and so on. It doesn't explicitly mention like the sun fails and the moon is dead and stars shall die and so on. But for me personally, just reading this, this was like an impression I got. Like, it doesn't mean that these texts are connected, but kind of the style, I don't know, it's somewhat, you know what I mean? Like the overall tone of it feels somewhat similar, if that makes sense. Like it's has something dark going on. There's like another page, I hope I find it this time correctly. 374 it says. Good that the page numbers here seem to correspond to each other. That's good. Shout out to... Ah, okay, it's in the index. I'm not sure if there is more of it. I would need to maybe look into Valley of Dreadful... Yeah. Nandungor. That also translates to the very positive name of the Valley of Dreadful Death. I like it. And Dungor theme, or Dungor theme, translates to the land of the dark idols. And yeah, Tolkien here also has like Dum means secret, or basically something not to be spoken of. That's also like an interesting detail here. Maybe worth making a short video about. I'm not sure if this really answers your question, but maybe I could a bit elaborate on the details and my thoughts. It could be outside entities like Ungoliant itself was. It could be fallen Maya. It could be like for men, even like, I don't know, an elf phantom. Like we have like a mention that there were phantoms in one forest in the First Age that, if I remember correctly, strangled passengers passing by. I'm not sure where they are mentioned. I think even in the Silmarillion there's a mention of those. And sometimes these really weird stuff is basically Book of the Lost Tales material that Tolkien just mentioned, and Christopher Tolkien needed some of these texts to complete the Silmarillion. I hope this was a really tough question. Namgungar, it's like Valley of feral cannibals, giant man-eating spiders. Yeah, exactly. There's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of weird stuff going on. So yeah, Rafael Gustavo, you really put out a really tough first question. Which yeah, I have to admit, maybe I'm a bit sorry that I can't really give you a really good answer or thought to this, but I really had like a few minutes before the stream and had to look into this matter myself a bit and try to put it into some context. I hope it works. Guten Abend to Matt Coles. Nice to see you here. Yeah, I also saw like there was some questions already discussed in chat because I was too busy answering this other stuff. If you have a question I skipped over it, feel free to post it again, because I can answer questions much slower than you can write them. So maybe if you, before you post your question, copy paste it so you can post it again or so. I try to keep a bit. I try to keep it a bit a bit on the present time of the chat, so I don't have to, because usually in the first streams I often just went back into just scrolled up to the chat and then I was back like half an hour or so. That's in my opinion not ideal. So I just checked. So Kirda mentions pointy ears are more a film thing. There are two indicators of pointy ears. One is in the letters. Oh, sorry, I just hit the microphone. What is in the letters of Tolkien? I would have to look how Tolkien phrased it. I can't remember the exact phrasing, else I might be able to find it. And Tolkien has in one of his dictionaries, or in one of his, like he also had notes on the roots of certain words he uses in his word, and the Elvish word for leaf, that is what Kierdan I think also mentioned. The Elvish word for leaf basically is also related to the word for ear. And he explains, I think, in this comment about this particular note in this, it's called a dictionary. It is a dictionary basically. That elves have pointy ears, and I think in the letter he talks about hobbit ears, which also are a bit pointy, and I think he mentioned it. Let me just see if I can find it. Maybe it is leafless, leafy. Maybe I just should look for ear. That might be smart. That doesn't look right. Okay, might be difficult to find, I have to admit. Mortal ears. Maybe it's not in the... I pictured it's about Hobbit, I think. I pictured a fairly human figure, not a kind of... No, is it about... Let me just see. Addressed American publisher and probably written much. Muffin Seeds asked to supply drawings of hobbits for use in the future edition of the Hobbit book. It's from... there's no date here, but it's around about 1938. I picture a fairly human figure, not a kind of fairy rabbit as some of my British viewers seem to fancy. Fattish in the stomach, shortish in the leg. A round, jovial face. Ears only slightly pointed and elvish. He says in letter 27, by the way it is. So he says ears only slightly pointed and elvish. Hairs not... short and curling. The question is, what does he mean? Does he put what did we call it? Quotation marks? In German would say Anführungszeichen, but I don't know what it is in English. Anführungszeichen, quote, unquote. I don't know. You know what I mean. So it's maybe he means it very literal, because often we imagine like fairy tale elves with also ears, but here it could be a thing. I forgot. Does Kirdan? I don't know if I guess it's not that important, but yeah, they might have slightly pointed ears potentially. Like it's not far off. Maybe it's definitely more a film thing, but there are hints for it. Whenever this leaf ear convo comes up, I always imagine maple leaf shaped ears. Yeah, it would be quite funny. So that was that. I'm not sure what this answer was directed at. So Rosie Gumtree has a bunch of questions. How did Sam Gumtree get to the Undying Lens? and Elrond's son. I think I don't think we know if Elrond's sons go to the Undying Lands. If they would follow family tradition, one would go to the Undying Lands, the other would not. But I think it's never really stated what happens to them. How Sam goes there. I think Círdan was still there. He took the last boat, so as long as Círdan is there, the shipwright. We have a fantastic artwork of Círdan, not to be confused with my moderator. on the Discord, he calls himself Círdan. Yeah, this is Círdan, one of the few elves mentioned that has a beard. Very interesting. Lord of Rings, it's described that he looks old and has a beard, and he is potentially one of the oldest elves we know of still living in Middle-earth. There are older elves than him, of course, but yeah, complicated matter. So as long as he's there, I'm not sure if there's an explicit statement about how we get there. Also interesting question. Why did the Eagles move Fingolfin's body after his battle with Morgoth? I think yeah, it's Fingolfin. Yeah. Instead of helping Gandalf and gets help like instead of helping, Gandalf gets help 5 times. That's to defeat Sauron and a dragon. That's a really good question. Why they didn't help? We know that the elves were, of course, living in that region and were potentially there. Why didn't they help him? Like, you always, I guess it's a very complex question to answer, to be honest. Sorry for all the questions. Hey, no problem. That's a Q&A. The more questions, the better. Exactly, I agree on that. The complexity of it is that sometimes, like, of this whole fall of Gondolin, I think multiple versions exist in all kinds of places, and they're in details often very different. And depending on the time they might have been written on, Tolkien's idea and imagination of the Eagles was quite different, if that makes sense. And because wait a moment. Maybe blend. I should maybe also get back to showing the questions here in chat again, right? Yeah. However, because the versions are different, his idea of eagles might have been very different as well. So maybe like this. It's our current question. The eagles, at some point, maybe I probably won't find the exact wording early on, but in some versions, the eagles were actually also, as Gandalf, Maiar. I'm not 100% sure if it's in the Silmarillion, though. But there definitely exist multiple versions of it. Let me just see. Yeah, here we have it. It's in the chapter of the beginning of the days of the first chapter, and there we can basically read, "For his throne was set in the majesty upon the pinnacle of Taniquetil, the highest of mountains of the world, standing upon a margin of the sea. Spirits in the shape of hawks and eagles flew ever to and from his halls, and their eyes could see so to the depths of the seas and pierce the hidden caverns beneath the world." So his eagles were also kind of his eyes. Thus they brought word of him of well nigh and all that passed in Arda. Yet some things were hidden even from the eyes of Manwë and their servants of Manwë, for where Melkor sat in his dark, thought, impenetrable shadow lay. That was badly read, but I guess you get the point. So the eagles in this version of the Silmarillion that we find in the Silmarillion, I think you find it also somewhere else, the eagles are spirits. So this hints that the eagles are Maiar of Manwë. We know that the eagles are definitely associated with Manwë. However, later in other writings, I think in letters or in other texts, we later know Tolkien changed his mind again on the eagles, and they were not Maiar anymore. But let's just pretend they were. In this case, and this is basically the boring, always the same answer to this question. The eagles in the first age. Oh, we have by accident have the good picture of the War of Wrath. The eagles in the first age always follow, let's say, the greater good and the will of Manwë, and as a result also Eru. And you also know that, for example, when, I guess in the first age things are still a bit different, but it took quite some time. Like in the first age is a lot about that Aman, so the west continent where the gods are living, and the Valar and the Maiar, not intervening into what is happening on Middle-earth. Only when Elrond's father Eärendil with his mother on the ship Vingilote arrives Aman and asks for help, only with the Silmaril. Only then the gods, the Valar, gods probably not the right term for them because there's only one god, but they are angels of highest rank, but sometimes they are also referred to as gods or powers in the world. They intervene at this point particularly. So it seems like they are very reluctant to directly go there and do something. So in case now of these eagles flying around, we of course have let's call it the problem, that they potentially can't intervene because they don't want. I know it's a lame answer, don't get me wrong, but so far that is what is going on. Maybe I have a good picture of the eagles somewhere. I have. Let me just see. Production value. Can't tell you which Hobbit film this is. I think it's the first. Unexpected Journey. Yeah. So as a result, they simply can't help Glorfindel in his battle against Balrog. Maybe they should have, but they can't. What they though do, and this is also important to understand often, is that Tolkien always had in mind mythology. Always had in mind, I don't know, it's an epic battle and fate. It's an epic battle between Glorfindel and the Balrogs, and Glorfindel is later greatly empowered because he sacrificed himself against an impossible to beat foe, which he actually beat, and died in the process too. And as a result, due to this noble sacrifice, he's later also empowered and also re-embodied and comes back to Middle Earth again as with the ambassadors of the West, with the Istari, with Gandalf, Saruman, Radagast, and the two Blue Wizards, whatever the name might be, Palando, Alatar, or Romestamo and Morinechtar, or Hymenar and Palicando, something like that. The new names from Nature of Middle-earth I haven't memorized too well yet. But this is basically also what they do. They probably can't help him in combat because it is the fight of Glorfindel. It was the end of Glorfindel at this time. Here the story of Glorfindel of the first age ends, and he only comes back in the second age or third age, depending on the version. But here it ends, and intervening here would have interfered with his fate, you could say. And what they though do, that's interesting, they basically, what do you call it in English? Just have to look at a funeral, that's a word. like his other, if that makes sense, his otherworldly connection, care to the body. So they take the body, bring it somewhere, and then it can be properly buried. This is also one of the often, I'm not sure if it was asked in a previous stream somewhere a year or so ago about some traditions like this. We have very little knowledge about, maybe from Rohan we know it, for example, and from Gondor. What happens when with the dead, for example? Are they buried and so on? What happens with the dead elves? And here we also have, like, I think stones are put up there where he fell and died. And this is what they now do. If that makes sense, the after death part, the eagles care for, but they can't change his fate. It was set in stone, if that makes sense at this point. It's, as said, it's a difficult thing. It might be like he dies in all versions, but as said, Tolkien's vision on what the eagles were is quite different. And even if they are not Maiar and just very intelligent beasts, as Tolkien I think later calls them, they can speak, for example. Even if that is the case, they are still under the will of Manwë and follow what he's doing, and so on. So I hope that answers this question somewhat. Yeah, I sadly would have to look up also, the other question was about Sam. If I would have to look up the other question about Sam, if there's more information. It's definitely an interesting question, so. But yeah, there was a question on what boat and so on. From the Grey Havens. Okay, that's a short question to answer that we can maybe do insert really, really fast. We need the first age map again. Let me do this. I show the question on screen really quick. Now I'm in the past again, but whatever. Kind of works. I should maybe do a new line here, something like this. Not perfect, but whatever. You get. I hope you're not getting triggered by it not being aligned, probably. But were some travels, elves or people, there and back to Eriador during the First Age? I'm not 100% sure how you mean it. Originally, let me just try to move the map around a bit. Yeah, make it a bit smaller. That might be help. So we have Beleriand there in the west, and Beleriand was later sunk into the ocean and vanished from the world. It was not accessible. Only Blue Mountains are left in the later ages. So this here is Eriador, and there to the west is Beleriand. And maybe it's hard to tell if, for example, your question is the elves of Beleriand, if some of them went back to Eriador. We definitely know, though, that for sure the dwarves had contact. The dwarves were here somewhere in the Blue Mountains. There's Norgrod and Belegost. And Moria was... let me see. Yeah, Moria is somewhere down here. They for sure... So, for example, dwarves traveled for sure through Eriador to Moria at times, especially when Belegost and Norgrod later were destroyed. But it was at the end of the Second Age. Though, were they completely destroyed? That's also a complicated question. If elves traveled back and forth, I can't really tell you. Maybe-ish. Maybe not. I'm not sure if there's a hint at this. I think men, though, potentially could have left. There is some weird mention that some men from some region in maybe not Dorias, but basically were here and went back in the First Age to basically the lands east of it, so Eriador and so on. That is possible. Of course, originally, That was a weird way to say things. Originally, men, for example, awoke here, and elves awoke here in Cuivienen. This here is Hildorien, and Cuivienen is where the elves awoke. There's a bay area in the Sea of Helkar, this huge sea here. And they traveled to Beleriand, so of course, originally, they must have most likely... Okay, there are some... Círdan is more an expert on this. There are some different routes they could have went, but one could assume that at least some of the elves gotten through Eriador to Beleriand during the First Age. Considering that note that the First Age is, of course, if we have here our trusted time scale, the First Age starts in most versions, even though sometimes it's pretended that it's different, and I does this for simplicity reasons sometimes too, starts when the elves awake. So long before Sun and Moon are created. And they end with the destruction of Beleriand and the end of the War of Wrath and so on and so forth, the aftermath of it. Then the Second Age starts. But so technically, depending on how to understand your question, yeah, the elves went through Eriador, at least some of them most likely. Men definitely went through this. Like, I have a video, it's called Harles and the Haladin. There in parts I also show you the routes. I always confusing how to pronounce the word route or route. I think both pronunciations are viable, but yeah, as a not native speaker, stuff like this is sometimes confusing. But yes, They went through Eriador, and we know that some men went back, even in the First Age, to Eriador. I think there is a mention somewhere. I don't know what the cause of it is, but it's definitely happening. Maybe let me just scroll down. Does the watcher count as a fish? So I hope this answers your question. Which was this here. So yes, elves, people, dwarves for sure, traveled there. If they went back though, like, that is this part of the question, I'm not sure if this is possible. Maybe only for the dwarves, because men had not really settlements and they were fleeing to the west as far from the east, from there where the Edain were coming from, and so on. Like they, as far as their legs could carry them, they went to the west, and usually they would not try to go back. Only a bit later, when things in Beleriand looked grim and dark, they might have returned. But it was not like there was like a huge city in Eriador and they traveled back and forth. It might be the case, but I think we don't have, at least I don't know of evidence of this that is strong. The dwarves, though, for sure, they might have traveled from the Blue Mountains to Moria all the time, back and forth. That is definitely a possibility. Even though it's not directly stated, it would make sense, because the dwarves had a big... Their capital, the capital of the Longbeards was Moria, or Khazad Dûm, as it's usually called. Okay, next question. So let me see. Was a lot about stuff. So let's scroll down a bit. Oh, Canadian Fantasy Corner. Shoutouts to. Also a content creator. Does the watcher count as fish? I'm not sure if the question's directed at me. I'm not sure though. Maybe it's a fish. That's an interesting theory, to be honest. I'm not sure though. I'm not my knowledge about biology is not that great, so I can't even tell you. I would assume that an octopus or something like this is not a fish, though it's not described as something in the books. It's more a film thing, but just in case people wonder. But the Watcher is definitely not... I call it Guardian, right? The Watcher is definitely not my creature of expertise, to be honest. Here I know. Matt Coles asks, I have a theory that might be nonsense. I have to admit, I can't, maybe... Okay, now I get why the Watcher is a fish now. Maybe the Watcher. That's an interesting question, though. I can't think of any examples for big fishes in the world, but yeah, I have a theory that might be nonsense, but would be interesting to hear your opinion. Are there examples of gigantic fish in Middle-earth? I don't remember seeing any. So that's a really interesting question. The oceans are really a bit of a mystery. And the oceans also have one element that makes them somewhat pure. And basically a lot of questions, I have to read it. And I think in every stream so far I read it, there is a quote from the book Morgoth's Ring that talks about Morgoth's... it should be a meme by now, I think, that I mention it so often. That Morgoth put a lot of his power inside the world itself, inside Arda itself, and the world itself became his one ring, basically. But his power is mostly or only in the landmass. And Morgoth's power was disseminated throughout gold, if nowhere absolute, for he did not create gold. It was nowhere absent. It was this Morgoth's element in matter, indeed, which was prerequisite for such magic and other evils as Sauron practiced it and upon it. It is quite possible, of course, that certain elements or conditions of matter had attracted Morgoth's special attention, mainly unless in the remote past for reasons of his own plans. For example, all gold in Middle-earth seems to have had specially evil... Let me read again. For example, all gold in Middle-earth seems to have had a specially evil trend, but not silver. Water is represented as being almost entirely free of Morgoth. So while Morgoth's power was in the landmass, it was the waters, the oceans were entirely free. So that we rarely hear about evil creatures in the water. We know only about Osse, a Maya of Ulmo. Ulmo is the Valar of the waters, of the sea. And also his wife Uinen. I even have pictures of those in case... I mean, when Kimberly 80 draws pictures, we should maybe show them. I think it's Kimberly 80. Here we have them. Osse and we have both in one. Nope, that's the wrong. This is the right one. Kimberly 80, shoutouts to you. This is Osse and Uinen, and they are, like, it's just a very free imagination of Kimberly here. It's not really described how they looked, but there is like an island in later in the Second Age called Tol Uinen in the bay of the capital of Númenor. Can I show Númenor? Probably not. Not on this map though. But that's all I have. Somewhere here. And there I think is also a lighthouse on it. It's named after her. I forgot why it is named after her. Maybe she raised it or something like this. So these Maiar are powerful enough to raise an island. Númenor, I think, was raised by Osse. So the Maya of Ulmo. and he was always like a candidate to be also corrupted by Morgoth, but depending on, I guess, on the versions, he resisted that, and so on and so forth. Quite interesting. But these are the only things I can think of. There are, of course, many ships that get sunk during all kinds of interventions. I always get the ring names mixed up, yeah. Also some names I sometimes confuse, but ring names work, I guess, most of the time for me. However, yeah, so often we know that ships get into something like a storm or something, and then they are destroyed. It's rarely that we, for example, have big sea monsters attacking them. Not rarely. I can't remember. I can't remember any instance of a big sea monster attacking somewhere. Maybe Book of Lost Tales has something like this. I don't know. Did Ulmo travel as huge fish at some point? I cannot remember. Maybe-ish. Don't ring any bells for me right now, but maybe somebody in chat knows a quote or so. Like I said, sometimes these details mentioned in like a half sentence are really, really hard to memorize if you not have just recently read them by accident or so, at least for me. But I, maybe not, I'm not sure. I can't remember either. Okay, Rosie Gemcheat says she thinks he did. Quite possible. Maybe somebody knows where we find it and we can maybe look into it. However, yeah, that's basically... There are for sure creatures in the water, but it's very mysterious. It's rarely re-explored. So I hope this answers the question in somewhat, but but yeah, there could be gigantic fish. Like the idea, if we, for example, think of the Bible, we also have what was his name, Jonah. I think in German we call him, yeah, Jonah. I think should be the name. He gets eaten by a whale, so I don't want to go into the direction that it's mythology, but stuff like this, like there's a lot of stories about all kinds of mysteries on the seas, so it also has sometimes this mythological character to it, with and gigantic fishes and sea monsters, put it that way, are definitely part of legends, let's put it that way. And as a result, yeah, I could imagine that Tolkien's world has that too, though to my knowledge it's never really mentioned in any shape or form, but yeah, I would agree there could be, but I don't think we find any evidence for this, at least nothing. Exactly. Unless Lexia almost swallowing someone. Yeah, it's kind of interesting that this story never happened. There are very little stories. There are a lot of stories that include the sea and traveling over the sea. For example, Eärendil and so on. But there are very little stories that mainly take place on the sea, I think. And that's as a result, we don't really hear about gigantic fishes, whales, sea monsters, something like this. Interesting. So, yeah, I hope this somewhat answers the question. Okay, so sorry, just got distracted here for a moment. I also got pinged by Canadian Fantasy Corner. I think, was it your first? I think you had another question somewhere, right? Sorry for if I skip some questions. Maybe just post them again. Also, yeah, I was pinged a few times. As said, if you have questions, feel free to just post them again. Let me just double check something really quick. There was an interesting question from a moment ago. Maybe I continue with that one, because potentially I wouldn't say easier to answer. But yeah, what was going on in the halls of Mandos? What's the username now? Jan. Oh, that's potentially hard to pronounce. But let's call him Jan. Or he asked, what was going on in the halls of Mandos? So the halls of Mandos, I think what was going on there. We have multiple instances. Okay, I have to look up a name, to be honest. Sometimes my name memory is bad. First of all, we have, of course, Namo, also often called Mandos, though his actual name is Namo, and he's one of the instances where the person is called after the place, his place, basically. And he is basically the lord of these halls. I have, I think, also a picture of it. Let me just see, by Peter Macri. Here we have it. And so we have at least something to visualize it. And yeah, the Halls of Mandos, basically, Mandos summons the, let's call it, souls or spirits of the dead there. If they were, yeah, most of the time there are some cases where this was refused. And due to this, are not going to the halls of Mandos, but basically this is a place to dwell, and there seems to be different. If we look, for example, at the tale of Luthien and Beren, there seems to be different separated spaces in it, because, for example, Luthien is also in the halls of Mandos, but she does not meet Beren there. Like, it's not indicated that they talk to each other, but we also know Beren was there too, which is an indicator that also men go to the halls of Mandos for some time before they continue on the gift of men journey to unknown regions of time and space envisioned by Eru for them, whatever that means. And yeah, so what is going on there? Not really much, but I guess in a way it's a yeah, place between, if that makes sense, because an elf is incomplete without body, because their spirits are bound, for example, to the body. But it seems like elves can definitely be inside these halls for quite some time. For example, we have the first wife of Finwë, and the mother of Feanor, and after she gave birth to her first son Feanor, she described that basically a lot of, if a mother gives birth, that a spirit of the mother, also part of her spiritual power, whatever you want to call it, goes into the child. And since he was the most powerful of the elves, or powerful in the widest sense, I would say, but yeah, one of the greatest craftsmen, for example, of the elves, she was extremely exhausted after this, and did not want to and lay to rest basically, and then her body left her, her spirit left her body and went to the halls of Mandos. And elves, when they are in the halls of Mandos, and they were good elves in the widest sense, they can be re-embodied and walk again if their body, for example, gets killed. This was different here, and their body was, if I read this correctly, was also kept alive or kept at a not decaying state, if that makes sense. And she just was there and did not want to come out of the halls. And as a result, Finwë was allowed to marry a second time because his wife, he still wanted to have children, and so on. His wife did not want to come out. However, when Finwë later died, he basically traded and said, okay, his wife's name was Miriel, you can now get out and I stay in the halls of Mandos while you are re-embodied. So that is one thing that goes on. Like, it's a place where elves can be without their body, without having too much trouble, it seems, for reasons that are never really explored. For example, Glorfindel gets also re-embodied. I guess he's a interesting case. Miriel is the one who died after Fëanor. Yeah, exactly. It was not. She did not die giving birth to him. It was after giving birth, like some time after it. So yeah, they go to these halls and can be there. We have an instance of, for example, Melkor Morgoth being imprisoned in the halls of Mandos, and he could not leave against the will of Namo, or the Valar, who is the lord of these halls, basically. And so it seems like Mandos' power is extremely great in these halls. It's his realm, and there he has the saying. And Melkor or Morgoth was trapped in these halls for 3 ages, it is described. And in theory, he could have been trapped there for longer, it seems. But he was pardoned by Manwë. It's an interesting reason. I think part of the explanation we find in Nature of Middle-earth, the Osanwe Kenta, and it's quite interesting to read. Why this is a different topic. I don't want to go would derail this answer here too much. And yeah, so that is another possibility. There seems to be different spaces. Another thing, there is also a Valar called a Vaire, that is the... No, she's not a sister, but she's the wife of Mandos. And she is also there. And she's known as the Weaver. And what she's doing, basically, is she weaves, and this is, I think, we have heard this, like, we know this, for example, from Greek mythology. She basically weaves the story of the world there. And does it. I think later Miriel... was in her service for some time while in the house of Mandos. I think even when she gets re-embodied, returned to life, no, it was after she was re-embodied, right? She returned to life, but still went basically to the went to the halls of Mandos, I guess, or around the halls of Mandos, at least in this realm, and basically was recording the deeds of the House of Finwë. I think we can read somewhere. Let me just check. It's also Morgoth's ring, the later Quenta Silmarillion. In case people are interested in this, probably hard to find right now on the fly, because there's a lot of text about Miriel in the in this particular book. So I hope this answers the question. There were some other questions. There are a lot of great questions. One question from Canadian Fantasy Corner. Is about, do you consider Gilfanor's tale canon along with Funky Morgoth's other right-hand man? This is Book of Lost... If I'm not completely mistaken, Canadian Fantasy Corner, it is Book of Lost Tale material. And usually everything in the Book of Lost Tales, even though I know some parts of it are part also of the Silmarillion, though, I usually don't consider them canon, because like it's difficult to answer what I find canon and not. But often, I see it as Tolkien's early versions of the Legendarium. Also, good evening in Capaton. Not sure if I pronounce the name correct. It's often very hard to say what is canon and not in there. I guess often you only use parts of the Book of Lost Tales if there's no other source, basically. Or not, or if it's the best working source, let's put it that way, if we look into this. And as a result, I often don't see it as canon, because the versions in these books are just so different from what we know from all the other sources. And Lord of the Rings, like when some of the stuff in the Book of Lost Tales was written, that was so early on, like we're talking about the 1920s. I think there are even some texts from 1916 and so on, like very, very old texts in these books. And it's then hard to implement them into stuff that was written basically 50 years later, 40 years later. My math is 10 years off here. And I think for me the most canon book is Lord of the Rings, and everything has to somewhat fit to those books, to Lord of the Rings, and it's really 3 or 6 books depending on how you interpret the internal book count of Lord of the Rings. It has to fit to that so that it can become in a way canon, though I have to admit some of the stuff from Unfinished Tales is really, really interesting. For example, it's a really interesting book, though. Like, I can fully recommend Book of Lost Tales if you know the Silmarillion well, and it can be really fun to read. Even the Silmarillion is among many fans considered not canon, because Christopher Tolkien had the problem of composing the Silmarillion out of the text his father has already written. I think there's one edition of him, because the version the only version he knew of, his father wrote, it was about the death of Thingol and these details there. He had to invent something, I think, if I remember correctly, or edit the version a lot to make it fit, because the other version was cool, though it did not fit to all the other texts. And what his goal was to create a book that complements or adds to the book of the Lord of the Rings, without being able to change the Lord of the Rings. And this is a really heavy task. He also had not access to all the texts that his father wrote at this time. And I think he published it in 1976 or so, a few years after his father's death. Maybe it was 78. I have a very bad number in date memory. And as a result, he probably also had to work through all the stuff first and write it down and learn what's in it. And probably this process was not complete, but he also had not access to all the texts. So what he did in the end is made a book out of all stuff he had available, and he was not every time choosing the newest version his father wrote, but he chose a version that fitted best to the Lord of the Rings, and changed the names. That it was what is the word? Unified, maybe? No, that's probably, like, the names were always the same. Consistent, that is the word. The names were consistent throughout the book, and this is how the Silmarillion was formed in the end. But some people know, okay, some texts, there are a few errors, of course, in the book due to, I don't know, reasons when, for example, the text was missing, or I don't know, for example, an editorial mistake that Christopher Tolkien himself hints at is the parentage of Gil-galad. He said his father should have left it mysterious or not explained it, but in the Silmarillion said that Fingon was the father of Gil-galad, but that is an editorial mistake. It should the best fit, or the newest version of it, is that Orodres, the son of one of Galadriel's brothers, is the father of Gil-galad. That is one of the known mistakes. As said, one version is changed and so on. But we also know that in some cases Tolkien had different ideas, like how his universe worked, when men awoke, and so on and so forth. A lot of stuff was missing. Originally, it was planned that the dialogue between Finrod and Andres was also part of it. Continuity also probably works. And as a result, some people debate the Silmarillion being canon. Can be debatable in some circles. I really personally see it as because it complements the Lord of the Rings so well. I like the Silmarillion a lot. I guess a lot of people do, and it's a very fundamental and important work in the context of Tolkien. And I also see it as somewhat canon, but of course, now that I do lore videos for such a long time and read so much in the history of Middle-earth books, I have to admit, of course, too, that I always, if I make a video and talk about stuff, I often also consider the history of Middle-earth text and say, another version exists of this too, and canon can be debated. It's this phrase I use very often in my videos, and the reason why is because there simply exist many versions that contradict this statement that is stated here in the Silmarillion, and so on and so forth. So you see how complicated everything is. But I wish the Andres dialogue had been included. Yeah, it's a complicated thing. Yeah, it's very awesome. It's published in Morgoth's Ring as well, and it's really cool. Yeah, it also for the parenthood of Orodres, multiple versions exist. I think in the it is Aignor or Angrod is a father in the other version. I always forget to. That's the thing I always. Angrod, okay. Angrod. But yeah, it depends, and this would make, of course, Finduilas the sister of Gil-galad, but yeah, it's a complicated matter. Thanks for answering the question so completely. No problem, man. Thanks for asking the questions. As said, if somebody has posted a question which I looked over, feel free to post it simply again, because as said, I can only answer questions that are like I can't even talk anymore. I can't answer questions as fast as you ask them, so I have to skip over some. But sometimes I try to get back. Exactly. Some people see it like this, that in mythology you also don't have a canon, if that makes sense. And I think you can also, due to the weird nature of Tolkien's works, that he never finished them, and we have all the versions that he ever wrote published, or not most of them, let's put it that way. And as a result, we can just piece stuff together how we want it. Like you can do it in mythology too. Like there are some versions for example, in the Eddas about Norse mythology, that also contradict each other. There's also not a continuity inside these books, because these are just tales that somebody collected and wrote in a book, and somebody told this tale this way, the other person told this tale this way, and it's then hard to make one version out of it, because the canon or the I don't know, that a franchise, like a fantasy work, has like one defined canon. It's definitely not a thing for Tolkien, I guess, except for maybe Lord of the Rings. Even The Hobbit is in a strange spot, because there also are two versions of it, even though Lord of the Rings explains the difference of these two versions. Like there's the 1937 version, the first edition of The Hobbit, and then there's from 51, I think, the second edition, then there's also a third, and so on. There are other little corrections in it, but the main difference is first edition, second edition. And there the chapter, for example, the chapter Riddles in the Dark was rewritten by Tolkien to fit better to Lord of the Rings. Originally, the original version, Gollum offered his ring freely, which he would never have done when it was the One Ring, but the concept of the One Ring did not exist. Thanks to referencing the Eddas, they are my favorite pieces of medieval literature. Yeah, they're really, really interesting. And also very complicated. To like, turns out mythology, medieval literature written in Old Norse is really complex. Like there's also different books. For example, there is the Codex Regius, which is I think the oldest book. Then there's also like a newer version that was written later, maybe based on the Codex Regius, called the Hauks book. And there's, I think, another version that is also a bit newer. And some stuff in the Hauks book is not in the Codex Regius, and vice versa. I think it's kind of interesting. So it's a bit like Tolkien. Different versions of the same story exist with different details. Fascinating stuff, but you really need to study this stuff to really get a good overview, I think, or really work yourself into this quite a lot. Also, Kirdan said, I wish he kept Elfwine. Yeah, and that is also like, that was, I think, an Anglo-Saxon lord or so that found the straight road and met the elves basically in Aman. It's an interesting idea, and then he returned and brought the stories to Middle Earth. It's such a cool idea from Tolkien. Yeah, that is also an important detail that Enkapaton also hints at, that the narrator is removed. Like everything, Tolkien, basically the idea of Tolkien was that he finds these old stories and translates them into English. That's basically the, I don't know, communication situation of these books. And so there's always a narrator and a source for everything. And then it has to be, if you try to discuss details in a lot of detail of the lore, you have to also consider who wrote this, what could his intention, could he have known this, and so on and so forth. Like in real world history, Tolkien really tried to mimic this quite a bit, and it's a bit unfortunate that some stuff felt flat as a result. But yeah, it's a complicated topic. Oh, I also read you Amanda posted the question like a second time. So I think I read it earlier. So we probably jump to this. Thank you for reposting your question. What if Sauron never had created the One Ring? Then things would be quite different. So one thing that is definitely what did I say? A lot of things would be different. So we have, of course, some cool stuff. For example, let me see. Do I have... I have an artwork which I want to use because I rarely use artworks of the artist for, I don't know why, just by accident, I guess. We would not have the Nazgul, I think, if he would not have created the One Ring. Because with not creating the One Ring, his whole plotline of corrupting the elves and creating the Rings of Power, or helping the elves to create the Rings of Power, would not exist. As a result, also... Narya, Vilya, and Nenya would not exist, the 3 elven rings of power. And those are kind of a foundation for certain elvish realms. So it's hard to say if they would exist. If the ring would not be created, there is a possibility that history would have turned out differently, and maybe Eregion would not be destroyed. If this would have been the case, that Eregion... Let me just pull up my Second Age map. Eregion is in front of Moria, basically, here, roundabout. Like, all this is a region, and the capital of Eregion, Ost-Inedil, I think, where was it? Somewhere here. I forgot. Was it at the corner here? There was a street going along the river, so it could be, I don't know, somewhere here is Ost-Inedil, the capital of Eregion. Doesn't matter too much where it is exactly. Just unsure now about the exact detail. And if this would have been the case, then for example Rivendell might, which is up here, would not exist. Gil-galad would still be king in Misland. Maybe. Maybe he would have died in another battle, because without the One Ring, Sauron for sure would have attacked Middle-earth nonetheless. But these are some very interesting implications that might have changed. Gil-galad, the last High King of the Noldor elves in Middle-earth. Also have an artwork of Kimberly 80 somewhere. Just have to do production stuff. Fantastic artwork by Kimberly 80. He might have survived, so the elves would still have left Middle-earth at some point, and men basically were left anyway, but we might have had different protagonists. If it is possible that, for example, the Istari, well, by accident I have Gandalf here, the Istari would not be in Middle-earth, because the One Ring was a really great threat, and in some versions the first 2 Istari, the Blue Wizards, arrived in the Second Age already. And Glorfindel also came with them to aid Gil-galad and Elrond, and as a result, one could maybe not think about that the whole One Ring thing is maybe tied to them appearing later in the Third Age as well. There's another very interesting detail. Without the One Ring, let's just imagine these Eriador could have been more intact, if that makes sense. Maybe Arnor later would be more intact. There's even a bigger implication. It is possible. Let me just see if I have my map. I have it. Númenor in this context is a really interesting one, because Númenor gets destroyed and Sauron's body is destroyed in the process. If you would not have the One Ring, Sauron would have died there and diminished there, if I'm not mistaken. I think the One Ring is basically what it could be interpreted. Let's put it that way. My interpretation is that maybe the One Ring helped him to survive this, because as long as the One Ring is not destroyed, Sauron is still bound to it. But that might go a bit far, to be honest. I guess, I assume he could have, let me phrase it differently. He could have, like, Sauron had the One Ring on Numenor, then Numenor was destroyed, and he returned with the One Ring as a dark wind back to Mordor, or to the east, and recovered. Potentially, without the One Ring, he would have recovered much, much later. So, I don't know what was happening from there. If we return to the mainland, I would suggest that the One Ring and the Ring of the War with the Rings were one reason why, for example, let me see, where is it? Here are the Gladden Fields. Somewhere here, the Stur Hobbits escaped to. And it's also some of the other events and wars that later led to the Hobbits coming here. So it is possible that without the One Ring, the Hobbits would not live in the Shire, but somewhere completely else. A possibility, because everything is really connected to these early events there. That is a possibility. Gollum would not exist without the One Ring, for sure. He would not find the ring. Bilbo would not find the ring and just be a little hobbit. It's hard to say if all this necromancer plot stuff would have happened without the One Ring, which happens here in Dol Guldur, at this point maybe called Amon Lang, here on the Second Age map. That is possible. Maybe, I don't know, would Bilbo be successful on his Hobbit journey if he would ever have done it without the One Ring? It's an interesting, another interesting question. Would he be able to save, for example, the dwarf from the spiders, or would he maybe also got caught by the spiders? It's yeah, I would say there's a lot of stuff that would have went different in the world. The question is, how powerful would Sauron be? And I can't really tell you that. I guess Sauron would also be maybe less of a threat, especially in the Second Age. So he would be more passive and maybe more scheming in other ways. I don't know. It's really tough to say. I'm not sure if this really answers your question, though, but that's it. Oh, Gaia is here. Welcome. Good evening. Can you explain who the Black Númenóreans are? Maybe that's a good question for... I'm not sure, Amanda, if you are happy with my answer there. But, yeah, I guess... Genau, exactly. Also, the Lord of the Rings would just be the Lord. I like that. That's a good. I hope this answers your question. Maybe, maybe not. If you have further questions, feel free to ask. Lord of Shadow or Lord of Mordor, yeah, maybe that the story would be called. Also, the Lord of the Rings, I guess, would not exist because Frodo only gets into all this, involved into this whole story because he finds the One Ring. On the other side, the One Ring is also source of Sauron's greatest power, but also his greatest weakness at the same time. And well, it's not source of his powers. The One Ring is a part of Sauron himself. It's complicated. However, what is interesting about this detail is that let's assume just one final thought to this question here. Let's assume Sauron would be in the same position at the end of the Third Age without the One Ring as he was before, then Sauron would have won, because Gondor and the others would not be able to defeat Mordor's forces there. Sauron was, of course, relatively weak, but his position wasn't that bad. His armies got repelled in Minas Tirith, and so on and so forth. That is all true, but still, I think Gondor would not have the strength to do this, to fight Mordor and destroy it completely by themselves. I think the conflict would have just continued. This Third Age would have been maybe longer, and maybe in the long run Sauron could have just won. The reason why he instantly loses there is because the One Ring is destroyed there, and he is undone and basically reduced to a mere shadow that has no power anymore. And that's definitely also a big other detail. Okay, I'm happy you are satisfied with the answer. Happy that you're happy with the answer was a weird phrasing, but what do I know about phrasings, right? Black Númenóreans, always important here, always fan favorite. The black. Can you explain who the Black Númenóreans? Let me just autocorrect this. Are. The Black Númenóreans. Okay, we had this topic, I think, in the last stream, but let's just talk about them again for a short moment. So the Black Númenóreans. So the Númenor was this island and probably the greatest realm of men ever, and the Dún Edain, the men of the West, or the West men, lived on this island. They are descendants from the Edain. We talked earlier about them, a specific group of men, and they lived here on this island in the middle. This island was a gift to them, and it was created basically for them to dwell there. After they helped in the War of Wrath, they now should have a place where they can dwell and live in peace. And they also got taught by the elves, and many of the Edain that went there were also taught in service of the elves. So they, as a result, were pretty advanced. And even some elves of Aman, the Undying Lands, especially from Tol Eressëa, sometimes sailed to Númenor. As a result, they got also some gifts like the Palantiri and so on and so forth. So it is very powerful nation, you could say. And they were, at some point though, their fear of death got really strong. And as a result, or how to phrase it, they feared, they also wished to be like the elves. They wanted to be immortal. They had a fear of death, and this turned to the point where they felt like how to say, betrayed is maybe the wrong word, but something like this by the by Aman and the elves. And there was a time where increasingly the elves became enemies of certain parts in Númenor, and Númenor basically somewhat divided, and a large part were the so-called Kingsmen, because this also came from the kings, some kings, not all of them, and they basically lost their faithfulness to Aman, to the Valar, their friendship to the elves, and as a result also to the will of Eru, because even though they die, the Númenóreans, the Dún Edain, got longer lifespans. And that's a complicated story. We talked about this in past streams. It can be, depending on the version, I guess, it can be interpreted that basically, it's not like their life got longer. It got longer, in fact, but it was just restored to the length they once had. And due to the fall of men, very, very early in the history of men, by worshipping Morgoth and so on, who disguised himself to be, I don't know, a lord of good, maybe God or something like this, and they started worshipping him, and they did not listen to the other voice they heard, that was the voice of Eru. Eru punished men and reduced their lifespan, and the men on Númenor got this restored to how it once was. There was even like ideas or theories that men originally were also immortal, but it's a very complicated topic to discuss here, which I don't want to do right now because I would have to read a lot of text to actually give you a somewhat coherent answer to or describe these details. Would also derail the question a bit too much. And now back to Númenor, we have the Kingsmen, but there were also those who remained faithful, called the Faithful. And the Faithful later, for example, are out of the Faithful later, Elendil, Isildur, and Anarion came and could flee and escape from the downfall of Númenor and create the realms Arnor in the north and Gondor in the south of Middle-earth, that are the Dunedain kingdoms in exile, whatever you want to call them. And however, the Númenor and the Kingsmen, the other faction, if you want, let's call it evil faction, the bad guys. Well, not bad guys per se, they just feared death and followed the advice of Sauron. That was probably their biggest mistake, and that led to the downfall of Númenor. And when Númenor got destroyed, not all of these Kingsmen got destroyed. A lot of them, but not all, because some were not on Númenor. Some were, for example, in Umbar, which is, I don't know where it is exactly to hit here with the arrow, somewhere here. Roundabout. I'm not even sure what this little thing is. Maybe it's more like here? I don't know. For example, in Umbar. And we know that some black Númenóreans were in Umbar. And yeah, basically those Kingsmen that survived this, and they were not part of the Faithful, and maybe were in contact with Sauron in some way, or influenced by Sauron at least, they became the black Númenóreans. And we know that some of them lived in Umbar. I sadly don't have a good picture of Umbar, which is unfortunate. Hope some artist makes one at some point. And, I gotta get going. Take care, everyone. Best of luck, and it's always such a joy to see your stream. Yeah, also have a fantastic rest of the day. Thank you for joining for such a long, for a few hours here already, I think. Almost 2. And yeah, have a fantastic rest of the day. Nice having you here and discussing Tolkien with you a bit. Canadian Fantasy Corner. As said, shoutouts to you, man. Also content creator, maybe check his channel. Yes, so back to the point. This is basically who the Black Númenóreans were. They were not the Faithful. As a result, they were enemies, potential enemies to the to Gondor and Arnor, and some were even in the service of Sauron. We know the mouse of Sauron, for example, was most likely a Black Númenórean, and we also know that some of the Nazgûl were also Númenóreans, so they could be Kingsmen and maybe distantly considered Black Númenóreans, but when exactly the term Black Númenóreans was established is really hard to say. Another detail is that there was also like diplomatic contact with Umbar and the Black Númenóreans from the side of Gondor, and there's one king that married a Black Númenórean wife. I think Bresil was her name. Yeah. No, Bresil was a forest. What was the name? Something with a B, right? Can somebody... Bresil was the forest in Beleriand. What was the name? Something with B. I can't remember. Let me see. Somebody in chat knows it for sure. Just have to wait a few seconds and it will pop up. The name is just gone from my head. I hope Kirdan is still there. Berusiel. Yeah, that was it. Something like this. I knew it was starting with a B. Yeah, she was a queen of Gondor, and she was the wife of I also forgot the name of her husband, but it was let me just think how it's pronounced. Taranon Philastur. Yeah. Double N would make the A the stress. Taranon Philastur was a Gondorian king, and he married. They had no children, so the line continues with his brother's line. And yeah, it's kind of interesting. They married basically to get a better relationship to Umbar, and there was a lot of conflict. Sometimes Gondor conquered Umbar, sometimes Umbar was conquered back. They went back and forth down there in the south, and there was like some conflict there. The cat lady, exactly, the cat lady. Maybe I should have. Let me just see if I search for cat lady, if I find it. No, sadly. Whatever, doesn't. And I just knew she would. There was an L in the name and starting with a B and BE or something like this. It's very similar. Sorry, I had to eat. I have no idea what's going on. No problem. We just talked about Black Númenóreans, so who they are. I hope this answers your question in some way. Isildur would have just finished Sauron. Yeah, that's also a good point. Maybe if we're jumping back in questions, but the question was what would have happened if the ring was not never created by Sauron, then for sure he probably dies in the last alliance too, and is just gone. Yeah, we're talking about the Queen of Gondor, exactly. Let me see. What question shall we answer next? Is Roa another word for gold? No, that is basically the word for there's Fea, which means spirit. That's one aspect of the being, and the other is, and Roa is the body. I'm not sure how it's pronounced, to be honest. Does somebody know how the H is pronounced in this name? Does it become basically like my initial thought would be either it's silent, so it's Roa, or it's it becomes like a German CH, like in Bach, so Roa. I'm not sure how it's pronounced right now. Maybe I could look it up. Maybe that's an interesting question, though. I know that I have looked it up in the past, but it's a word I rarely say, so the exact, and very few words start with an H and an R. Let me just see. Appendix E. Or maybe it's just an H. maybe that, I think I remember now. It makes, I think it makes the RH represents a voiceless R, usually derived from the older initial SR. It was written HR in Quenya, so it is Roa. Roa. It's hard to say. It's a voiceless trilled R. Roa. That's how it pronounces. Okay. Remember now. Yeah, makes totally sense. The Tolkien professor Olsen speaks the H like a normal H, and then does a German Choa, I think, something like this. But I think the pronunciation would be. It's really hard to say. Usually, when I trill, you make a sound like r, like I don't know, Rohan, and then there is, for example, Rudauer. It sounds pretty similar then, but it's just instead of r. It's hard, so it's Roa. But thanks for the hint. But it's really a rare case. I know that RH is pronounced like this, so the voiceless version of the trilled R. But yeah, it's really interesting. So yeah, I hope this answers the question about it. It means it's a body, basically the body of an elf, for example. Exactly, Rune is another word which means west. And yeah, this word I can't say. Maybe there are some people from Wales here. The LH is I think the double L in Welsh. Is this the yeah, it's Welsh. In German, Welsh is called Walisisch, which is kind of strange. Yeah, you missed the answer. It was too long an answer to repeat it again for you, but you can. This stream will be there as a VoD. Exactly, it is Hlun or something like this. I can't really do this, but it's somewhat similar. I have really trouble with saying this particular thing because it does not exist in my language, and I'm not sure if I'm doing it right. So that's a bad combination for saying something. But yeah, it would be the unusual Welsh L sound in this case. The U would be long. And yeah, it's an interesting language. Tolkien was heavily inspired by Wales, like Welsh, like for his languages. The way you said it sounded correct. Yeah, I looked several videos online to try to somewhat learn it. Let's say it's good enough. I'm sorry to all the Welsh speakers here to butchering this, but something like this. It's difficult. We find it. LH represents this sound when voiceless, usually derived from the initial. In Quenya, it's written HL. So it's basically the same as Kirdan that just hinted at. But yeah, it's also a voiceless version of the L, basically. Hlun. difficult stuff, but very interesting. Where was I? Wasn't there like some question I wanted to jump to? We just talked now about things. Yeah, that's a good point. That Roa is physical matter and everything, flesh, gold, etc. I think the context of this word, like I said, of course, different translations for it, but the root of the word Roa is basically means flesh. But usually it often refers to the body and so on in some of the texts. Did you answer your favorite Tolkien character? Okay. I think that was also asked a moment ago. Let me just check some context here. Favorite Tolkien character? Always a difficult question for me to answer because there's so many. No, that is that's what I just looked up for a moment ago. There it is. The motto of Wales. Did you answer what your favorite Tolkien character is? I think in past streams for sure. I'm not sure what I said there, but probably it changes a bit depending on who I'm working, what I'm working on. And I would say usually, I don't know, there are a lot of characters I really like. I like, for example, Aragorn quite a lot, but also, of course, Elrond is also one of my favorite characters from the series. I also really like Glorfindel. It's really hard to name like a specific character that I like most, but it would be probably one of those, I guess. Especially when it comes to, let's say, side characters. Of course, I also like Gandalf. Gandalf is pretty cool. So it's a pretty classic answer. I think those characters we know most about have a lot of potential for being your favorite character, because especially like all the Lord of the Rings main characters like Frodo and his friends that we learn so much about, and also Bilbo from The Hobbit and so on. Fantastic characters. There's I guess no reason to not like them. When it comes to more obscure characters that we don't know much about, as said, Elrond, we know quite a bit about him, so I find his story very tragic and interesting as a result. There are some characters that are more the bad guys, like Feanor, which give like the story a lot of spice and his sons. So in a way, they're also very interesting, but I guess in many ways they're not very likable. But they're very important characters, and that's also why a lot of people like those characters, because of those qualities of being good guys. Rose Cotton, of course. There's not enough love for Rose Cotton. Yeah. Looking at in I don't know, on the internet there's a meme, the meme checking name. But yeah, I see. Yeah, you're right. Rose Cotton is rarely covered like in lore videos, which I guess we don't know that much about her in comparison, but usually I like the elvish characters, like Círdan is also a side character I like quite a lot. of course, Galadriel, wouldn't call her, yeah, I guess maybe in the same level as Elrond is a side character. But Círdan is a really obscure side character that just appears a few times. I covered him also in quite some detail and all the history of the elves along with it in one of my longer lore videos. Same with Elrond, which I'm still working on the next part. Will probably still take some time. That one I like. Glorfindel, as said, I like him too because he's kind of pretty, I don't know. It's a legendary elven warrior. What's not to like about him? And yeah, I don't know. He helps Frodo out, risking his own life. There was the question, who's more powerful, Glorfindel or Fëanor a moment ago. I forgot who asked the question. Really hard to say, I guess. Depends on how. It's always my same answer. It depends on how you define power. Oh, that is interesting. Whatever, just technical detail. YouTube just tells me my current bitrate is too high. I should maybe lower it. That is unusual. What, my bitrate is too high? I still hope, though, that the stream works for you all and you have no problems. But, yeah, sometimes increase the bitrate. Círdan best, yeah. My moderator has to know because it's his name. Got the phonetics 10 ticked off the list for the stream. Nice. And what you liked seeing in the movies? Is there anything in the particular you would like seeing on the screens? Costumes, characters? Well, yeah, Glorfindel for sure. I would have loved to see Glorfindel. I would have loved to see Tom Bombadil, which was, I guess it made sense to not include him in the films, but also I know that the Glorfindel fans probably don't like that he was basically replaced by his role by Arwen. That is the reason why some are very unhappy with the change, but I have to admit, it makes so much sense for Arwen to be replacing him, so she becomes a bit more fleshed out and her role becomes a bit bigger in the films, because for the way they chose to portray Aragorn, she's a very important motivation for him to change and to do what he's doing and to portray his inner conflict. So they needed to implement her somehow, bring her more into the movies. That makes completely sense. But of course, I would have loved to see Glorfindel chasing down the Nazgul into the water. Like, that's pretty awesome in my opinion. High bitrate for still image, it could be overkill. Yeah, that is sure. It is overkill for what I'm doing here in the stream. The reason why it's high is when I stream on Twitch, I need a higher bitrate. Like for like I had a problem when I streamed Elden Ring on my Twitch stream, that for some time the bitrate was too low because I don't know what lowered it. I maybe accidentally changed. There was an update that changed the bitrate. I don't know what it was. And I was just streaming at less than half the bitrate I should stream with this resolution and frames per second. Having like a lot of changes. Like if you have actual gameplay footage that you stream, then things become problematic a bit. And now I increased it again in the same setting I use on Twitch currently. So that is why it says my bitrate is, I know, almost twice as high as it should be. But yeah. Hope it does not cause any trouble here. Of course, Glorfindel is way better than Arwen. I don't care if it makes more sense. Yeah, I can see that, but yeah, it's just from a creator perspective who appreciates the art of creating film, and so I can at least understand this change, even though I can also understand that people don't like it. But yeah, that I would have loved to see. I would also have loved to see, even though it's not really important in the books as well, in a way, I really would have loved to see Umbar. Like, I don't know, there's so little artwork. Every time I want to talk about Umbar, I have to basically show you this here. There it is. I don't have a cool artwork of Umbar. I don't have anything. It's sad. So Umbar I would like to see. Yeah, there's also a scene where Peter Jackson planned Arwen fighting in Helm's Deep, and they even filmed it there. There's some deleted scenes. Maybe you can check it on YouTube. It's kind of interesting. I'm happy that he did not go with that, because it would have changed maybe a bit too much. But I guess it works. Okay, it's also the what if question by Amanda. She asked it a moment ago as well. Let me just see if I can format it in somewhat a decent matter. What if the Witch King and the other Nazguls had known about the arrival of Aragorn and the Army of the Dead movie version, not book, and had faced them on the battlefield dismounted? It's really hard to say what would have happened there. Like it's like a good answer to this. It's really hard to say. How would the interaction between the Nazgul and the undead, the Oathbreakers be? That's really hard to predict, I think. For sure, this was a surprise, and they were kind of distracted with the main battle going on, and they were a bit surprised in the films, I guess. Though in the book, of course, it's a bit different. Everything is very different from the movie version. And in the book version, they also can't they just scare off the people from the ships and they jump into the water, and then Aragorn says, "Okay, I see your oath as fulfilled." And so the reinforcements for the Witch King were basically not coming as a result, which saved the day. And yeah, in a way that is not portrayed, of course, in the movies. There, yeah, it's hard to say what would have happened there. I don't know. Really, really hard to tell. It would for sure be bad news for Aragorn, but how would they interact with the Witch King? I don't know. In a way, the Nazgul are powerful, and they can, like, I think the Nazgul would not be powerful against the Oathbreakers, because the Nazgul's main power is they have an aura of terror, the same as the Oathbreakers. I don't think they can scare each other. So I would say that since the Nazgul are outnumbered by the Oathbreakers, they would simply retreat and not try to make a place there, and they can't kill them anyway, in a way, so they probably had to retreat and find a solution for this. Maybe that's a very boring answer, but I don't know. On the other side, we know that the Witch King has some power of evil spirits, probably through Sauron. On the other side, the Oathbreakers are now bound to, and they have a goal, so I can't see that he could ally with them or so. I would say the Nazgul and the Witch King would retreat then, I don't know, find other solution or something like this. Hope that answers the question somewhat. Not enough long bottom leaf to the question. What did you miss in the films? Let me just get some more tea, yeah? So, The oldest Numenor story has actually guns. Yeah, it's true. There's a hint that there are guns in the old Numenor stuff. That's true. I find the opinion to have films be the complete book kinda strange. Yeah, that's a good point. I guess, like, if you transfer one medium to another, you always have the problem of having it's always an interpretation, if that makes sense. Like, even how you, like, the moment you make a book character into a film character, it's already an interpretation how somebody reading the books might imagine that this character looks, and then they have to cast someone and he has to represent one. And if this character resonates very well with the imagination of a lot of people, then this character often works and say, yeah, he's well adapted. But of course, in some cases that can be very, very difficult because you simply don't know how they look. And like, there is of course Círdan also appearing in the films, but there he has no beard and so on for whatever reasons. But there are for sure many other characters where you just have to think, how do they look? Are they really described in the books? Like just some minor characters that just shortly appear somewhere. And yeah, I don't know. It's difficult, but of course, as a result, also all the story and so on, it simply doesn't work. Yeah, it does. Thanks. Yeah, no problem. And that's a pretty good point. That things have to change in some way or another. Sometimes stuff doesn't work in terms of pacing, in terms of structure. It works in the book, but it does not work on film. That's, for example, why Peter Jackson had to spread out like the chapter, the Council of Elrond, many meetings, and the Ring Goes South. At the beginning, at least, of the Ring Goes South, has so much exposition. Like the Council of Elrond is exposition. The chapter, it's a long chapter with tons of information, and even in the film, you get a lot of background story and explanations in this, but Peter Jackson had to spread this out. So he made a prologue and put some parts of that explains the beginning in the prologue. And then there's another flashback with Elrond saying, I was there, Gandalf, 3,000 years ago. That stuff like this has to be put in place to work and spread out. Just imagine everything that is in the Council of Elrond and many meetings would only be explained in Rivendell. That it would be not working too well. And as a result, he had to spread some of the explanations out, leave some explanations out, or move them further into the film, like the forging of Aragorn's sword happens much later in the film. I think in Return of the King he gets Andúril, the Flame of the West. In the books he gets Andúril when he is in Rivendell the first time, after with Frodo. Not the first time, but you know what I mean. When he arrives with Frodo and the others in Rivendell, then Andúril is forged, and he gets it there. Like, there are a lot of little differences like these, and it makes sense. So yeah, it's always like this. Okay, that is the weirdest question. It's not a weird question, it's a funny question I've ever read here in this thing. So maybe I can't really answer this question in a good way. But Could Gondor have easily defeated the orcs if Gondorian soldiers would have been equipped with guns with rubber bullets? That's a question I've never heard before, but I find it kind of funny. I have to admit. So, yeah, maybe. If they would have just enough rubber bullets, that might work, I think. But I guess, yeah, as soon as you have, like, a possibility to shoot projectiles at enemies at high speeds with enough penetration that it even can go through armor, probably not with rubber bullets, but with real bullets, and you can shoot them in a high fire rate, and you have an advantage when it comes to distance. Like, the moment you have this advantage, I think it's pretty tough to be... You can beat pretty much anything, I guess. I think they did a brilliant job of the council. Hugo was awesome as always, such a great actor. Yeah, it was really, really cool. I really like when I first saw Elrond, I said, I know him from somewhere, maybe from Matrix. But yeah, I got used to him pretty quick. Yeah, okay, you think you just basically you use rubber bullets to just scare them away. But as said, if you would have enough rubber bullets, for sure, there's nothing they could have done. If the rubber bullets out, the range of the rubber bullets would be greater than of bow and arrow, so the orcs can't shoot back in any shape or form. Yeah, that potentially would be possible. Orcs are allergic to rubber, so yes, they would have won. Oh, Rosie's gone. I wish you a fantastic rest of the day. Thank you for asking questions and being here. See you next time. There's also quite some dialogue going on here, which I'm not really sure what the origin of it is. But what did Gandalf do at Tom Bombadil's place for 2 years, and what did they talk about? Sadly, I have to admit, we don't know what they talked about. Like, it is, it's a really good question. I don't have a good theory either. There's some theories that lead to the, maybe, he is, that Tom Bombadil is, for example, Eru or something, so he's God. But I don't think this theory, it's not my favorite theory, even though I can understand why people have this and like this theory. It's definitely a cool theory, but not my preferred theory, let's put it that way. And I think Tolkien also denies that this is the case, but, excuse me. But, yeah. What they could have talked about, I guess, in a way, it's mystery, like, Gandalf is also, even though we know Gandalf quite well, he's also a very mysterious figure in the world, because people know him as old man with a staff that seems not to age, that looks old but seems not to age further, and he's like a wizard, so it's by his profession basically it's already indicated that he has supernatural powers compared to others. So I would say that people often ask what is going on with him, and then he also goes for quite some time, as you say, to the old forest and talks to Tom Bombadil for such a long time, and I don't know. I assume it makes kind of sense that that the two very supernatural and mythological, like a wizard, like, I don't know, we know from stories with, for example, Merlin or something. You know what I mean? Gandalf is also kind of a mythological figure. It kind of makes sense that they go and meet at some time, and he dwells there for some time, because now with the elves leaving Middle-earth, and the age of men basically starting, where only men are around to take care of everything, with the big bad guy, also supernatural, being defeated, it for sure makes sense that they leave, not leave, that the mythological beings leave the world, and or maybe are just focused at a specific place, like the old forest, where still are legends about it, and there's Tom Bombadil, a weird man with yellow boots and a blue jacket, and so on, is living, and then this grey, or now then white wizard, is going there. In addition, Gandalf's structure of I wouldn't say command, but he is one of the Istari, and in the film is often called the Order of the Istari. So there is an order, there's like a leader. Now Gandalf the White becomes the new leader of it, but all Saruman failed. The blue wizards are not there, they are in the east with a different purpose and task. Similar purpose and task, but they're just not part of the story of Gandalf and his area of influence, if that makes sense. And Radagast is for some strange reason gone. Like, he helped at some point. Maybe he also got to the old forest and they all met there together. And Isengard, the old headquarter of Saruman, basically, and him as the leader. If Isengard is the headquarter of the of Saruman, it's also the headquarter of the Istari in a way, if that makes sense. So now they need a new headquarter, because it's I wouldn't say destroyed, but let's say occupied in a different way. And maybe that is where they go next then, with their things, talking about what happened. Maybe now that the evil is defeated, Gandalf is also kind of free from his task, so he can do other stuff. Maybe Gandalf is somebody who seeks wisdom and goes to places where other people do not go, and sees wisdom, pity, compassion, and etc. Inside, for example, the Hobbits and so on. Nobody really knew about the Hobbits except of the Istari, except Gandalf, who has a deeper look into this and discovers. He looks deeper into things, if that makes sense. And I guess now he has time to also look deeper into other details, aspects of the world itself. So maybe gather wisdom from this, because Gandalf is a very wise character. And so it makes sense that he goes to this one place where one of the biggest mysteries in the world lives, and I don't know, tries to find out more, or I don't know, maybe they know each other from old times. Who knows? Really hard to say. Greetings from Portugal. Nice to see you, TFC. Greetings from Germany. Hope you had a fantastic day. Thanks for joining here. So, yeah, exactly. They could exchange different attempts to reflective rambling is there too. Welcome, nice to see you. Yeah, the stream timings here is always weird from my side. Wanted to start earlier today, but couldn't make it, so start relatively late. And we are, of course, still going a bit. Thanks for all the great Tolkien wisdom. Here's a German joke just for you. Why are German fish so lucky now? I'm curious. Oh god. Because the sound they make is glück, 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 glück. Okay, I get it. Here, just to be a tongue twister. Okay. Yeah, okay. I get it. So, if for people not understanding the joke, the fishes make look, something like this, and Glück in German means luck. So that's not bad. I like the joke. Cool stream. I think first time I've caught. Yeah, it will always be the same that some people might not get notified, even though they would have had time to watch, and stuff like this happens. Very unfortunate, but of course, some people simply are busy with other things that are more important, of course, and have to watch the VoD or so. But yeah, happy you enjoy it here. I think Gandalf brings him some old Toby, and you know Tom growing the bomb. Wow. Why didn't the Eagles just take Frodo to Minas Tirith and then begun the quest? Because Sauron was focusing on Minas Tirith and had his eye on it, and he expected them to also go to Minas Tirith and was surprised that they did not go there. And I think part of the success that the Hobbits had was by not going to Minas Tirith, going somewhere else. But yeah, it's really interesting to see this, to see these details. On a lore question, also by Lemon Melon, what caused? Let me just put it on screen. What caused the evil to get drawn to Moria in the second and third age? I would say definitely the Ring of Power would be a reason why there was a lot of trouble among the kings of Moria and Moria itself later. Because we know that the dwarves were very eager to search riches in the mountains and mine and create cities. Like, they were builders. They like to build. To build, they need material and so on and so forth. So that, and the Ring of Power that potentially Durin the Third got from Celebrimbor, at least according to Lord of the Rings, and among the dwarves, it's believed it was like this. Maybe it was different. See my video about the 7 Rings of Power for more detailed discussion on how the rings got to the dwarves. Yeah, with this, it says that they also made them a bit more greedy, and as a result, this led to a lot of problems. Of course, in Moria, they also mined for mithril, and this is not gold. And as we have just established earlier, gold had the tendency for evil, because, let me just try to find it again. It was this Morgoth element in matter indeed, which was a prerequisite for such magic and other evils as Sauron practiced with it and upon it. It is quite possible, of course, that certain elements or conditions of matter had attracted Morgoth's special attentions. attention, mainly unless the remote past for reasons of his own plans. For example, all gold in Middle-earth seems to have had specially evil... I read this sentence wrong the last time too. For example, all gold in Middle-earth seems to have had a specially evil trend, but not silver. So it seems like the power of evil of Morgoth, who infused the world with his power, was stronger in gold, maybe. That's how you can... Oh, I read this a little bit. And as a result, some of these materials potentially just drew in power more. Also, thank you for posting the video here. And yeah, so the gold and the riches of Moria, even though silver and mithril is silver, is at least a material that I imagine. Now, I don't imagine it as silver. It is a silver material, but it's not silver. That's what I mean. Potentially it drew less, but still the dwarves had riches also, I guess, in the form of gold and so on. And greed, in combination with greed, it can only lead to disaster. And that is, I think, why Moria got into a lot of trouble. And later they dug too deep, as we learn, as it's phrased in the films, and they awoke an ancient evil, a Balrog of Morgoth, and that led to the destruction and the dwarves abandoning Moria. So I would say it mainly goes back to the Rings of Power, I would say, that the dwarves got. A lot of evil things that happened to the dwarves are related to this Ring of Power and to them seeking Moria and so on, and turning Moria from the capital of the Longbeards of the House of Durin into like a terrible place that is related to so much suffering and so much despair and so much death and so on. In the later time, it's basically perverted from this glorified capital of the dwarves to a graveyard, basically. It's very interesting. What arrived to Moria first? The One Ring with Smergol, or the Balrog? The Balrog was... That is hard to say. It depends on how you define Moria. So somewhere under the mountain there was a Balrog after the end of the War of Wrath of the First Age. So I have this awesome artwork which I would definitely want to show. I just have to find the right artist for it. There he is. So this is the War of Wrath. We see the Balrogs, and after the defeat of Morgoth, the Balrogs had to hide somewhere, and one Balrog hid under Moria. At this time, though, Moria existed. The capital of Khazad-dûm existed already at this time. It's not... the capital was founded later. It was potentially improved by all the dwarves from the Beleriand section, let's call it that way. Well, not all of them, but a lot of them coming to Moria and living there. But overall, the Balrog came there when Moria already existed. But he was not directly in Moria, but he was just in the mines surrounding Khazad-dûm, Moria. And as a result, yeah, exactly. He was much earlier there than Moria existed, and then also much earlier there than the rings were created. So yes, the rings were then later created, and the Balrog was already living there, but he was just discovered or woken up by by the dwarves later in the thing. Yeah, that's basically how I understand it. Also, welcome, Phil Alexander. The dwarves searched for more and more riches. They got too greedy, dug too deep. Potentially, their eager for that was increased by the Ring of Power, or multiple rings of power in their possession. And as a result, they basically disturbed the Balrog, and the Balrog was not a fan of that, and then just destroyed the realm, and the dwarves had to abandon it. Did Smaug see or sense the One Ring when he saw Bilbo, and what if Smaug claimed it? It's hard to say what happened when Smaug claimed it. It was potentially not good for the world when he would have gotten the One Ring. The answer to if he sensed it, like, I could make a very lame answer to this question, and that would be that originally, 1937, the concept of the One Ring did not exist yet. So as a result, he did not sense it because it was just some magic ring that Bilbo had. What Tolkien's stance on later this was, I don't know, to be honest. But I think probably not. You have always most amazing art collection. Thank you, much appreciated. It took me years to get the permissions of all the artists together, and I asked all the stuff artworks you see I have permission to use. So I'm very thankful to the artists. That's also why I always try to give them the shout out. There will also be all the links in the description of this video. So if you want to check the art gallery, some also do commissions. For example, Sara Morello does commissions. She has some amazing artworks too. I don't have a fitting one for the current question, but I know Jenny Dolphin, for example, has an Etsy shop, I think, where she also sells stuff. So check this out for sure. You just see Sara Morello's stuff. Let me see. One of my favorite Sara Morello artworks is of Galadriel and Arwen. That's pretty awesome. It would be awesome if dragons could shapeshift into forms of men, the way I've read in other books. That would be an interesting idea too, I agree. It's, I think, not implicated, though, that they can. What they can do, though, is, I don't know. Like, if you look at Glaurung, he has kind of some interesting abilities, like, I don't know, his gaze can basically freeze Turin at a place, and he can curse him in a way that's kind of interesting. Okay, somebody's asking for the source. I have to look up this. I hope I have the. No, I'm not. I don't need to hope. I know where it is. Just give me a moment. I can find the page. Let me just see. Where did I place this? Rings, shouldn't it? Ah, there it is. I just have to find my script for the video. let me just double check it. Okay, so it's from The Lord of the Rings, Appendix A, Durin's Folk, page 1076 and 77. The only power over them, the dwarfs, that the rings wielded was to inflame their hearts with a greed of gold and precious things, so that if they lacked them all other good things seemed profitless, and they were filled with wrath and desire for vengeance on all who deprived them, but they were made from their beginning of a kind to resist most steadfastly any domination. Though they could be slain or broken, they could not be reduced to shadows enslaved to another will, and for the same reason their lives were not affected by any ring to live either longer or shorter because of it. So in even Lord of the Rings, Tolkien directly states that the rings for the dwarfs inflamed their hearts with a greed of gold. And it's very interesting that it's particularly stated only of gold, and that they desired this thing. And this might also explain, even though Mithril was part of the riches of Moria, it still was also greed for gold that potentially that there are not many statements about the greed of the dwarves, I think, but this one you find in Appendix A, Durin's Folk. I hope this clears things up. It's also stated that it needs gold to breed gold. Like I can here Reflective Ramblings quoted this. It's a bit hidden. Hey, no problem. It's sometimes, it's always it's of course difficult every statement, especially in Livestream, to prove the source for it. In this particular case, I made a video like a few months ago. That's why I have still it very present, the stuff, and I can look into my script just to find the quote, because I usually, in my videos, I often try to give the quotes. Like I said, can maybe post it here in chat. Reflective Ramblings also posted a moment ago. That's a video to the 7 dwarf stuff there. I think I go a bit through this. A quote definitely appears in it too. But it's 1,000 something pages of text, plus the other tons of books, and somewhere Tolkien mentions something in a half sentence and you totally forget about it. Happens a lot, and yeah, it's good that you asked. Yeah, not all effects could be avoided. It's kind of very interesting that the dwarves their lives of the dwarves would not prolong when they would wear a ring like this. Oh, I need to watch this video. I hope people watch it, because I'm a bit underwhelmed by the by the views on this video, I have to admit. It was a lot of work, even though it's just 37 minutes. But you can imagine if you make, like, about the 7 rings of the dwarves, there is not that much text. And if you make a 37-minute video out of it, you have to dig really deep. And I came up with some good theories and ideas and tried to explain and theorize certain aspects, because there's not that much stuff about the dwarves, sadly, and the 7 rings. For example, we don't know who the 7 lords of the dwarves are. We don't know who. We only know that Durin got a ring. We don't know who the other lords are who got the other 6 rings, and so on. It's really, really difficult to bring this in context. We know that some rings got destroyed, but we don't know under which circumstances. I always had a theory, but I noticed that this theory has some flaws, and so on and so forth. Oh, it's yeah, it's a really nice video in my opinion. Oh wow, reflective ramblings. Yeah, shoutouts to you. Thank you for your membership. Much appreciated. I mean, you do basically you work here for free and then you also pay me. That's very nice of you. Much appreciated. Also read your thank you that I always shout out the artists. I really appreciate the majority of Tolkien creators being so aware of that. Yeah, it is true, and it's good that we of course shout out the artists, because they make the art and I use it and I also monetize my videos. So it would be unfair to not give shout outs to them when they contributed to my video. And that's also why I always ask for permission. I don't ask the film studios for permission, which is like a little gray area. But I hope Amazon won't make problems, because I hope we get some good-looking pictures when the series comes out, so I can use them for my lore videos, even though when they're not related to the series. For example, I want to talk about Númenor and the capital, and then now I have a screenshot from the trailer that I can use. I like that. I like having something to show in my videos, so people can some roundabout visualize it. Oh, character limit, 200. Yeah, it's very short on YouTube. I think on Twitch, it's the character limit is a bit higher, like 400 or so. That's an interesting quote. John Ronald Rule Tolkien has become a sort of mountain appearing in all subsequent fantasy in the way Mount Fuji appears so often in Japanese prints. Sometimes it's big and up close. Sometimes it's a shape on the horizon. Sometimes it's not there at all, which means that the artist either has made a deliberate decision against this mountain, which is interesting in itself, or it's in fact standing on Mount Fuji. That's a very good comparison, I have to say. YouTube is mean about percentages it takes from YouTube creators, but unlike Patreon, it at least doesn't take out the amount on the first of the months with everything else in life. Oh, Oriana's Winters here. Welcome, man. Nice to see you. It's been a while. It's really true. Yeah, doing quite well. Hope you're also doing well. We had so far a fantastic YouTube lore Q&A stream with lots of interesting questions. Snap for Art, the increase of greed completely slipped off my memory, while I could remember Tolkien stating that the Seven not having power over the dwarves several times so well. I will definitely watch the video. That happens a lot. Like, sometimes you mix things up. There was like a weird case in a video where I talked about that Frodo had Sting on the Weathertop. And I made a video where I talked about Sting before that. And of course, I know he gets it in Rivendell. In the film and in the book, he gets the Sting in Rivendell. And yeah, I also, like, sometimes you know things better, but you have like forgot something or mixed something up in your head for whatever reason. It happens easily. But I don't know. YouTube percentage stuff is interesting. But it's sometimes it works. I have to say that my ad rates currently are relatively decent, I have to admit. So it seems like people like to watch ads on my channel, which I appreciate a lot. Can't complain too much, but of course all the other stuff helps. Currently not having a Patreon account, like I know a lot of content creators have, and it's potentially smart to do so, but I often not doing smart things, so business-wise, so I don't have a Patreon yet. I think about maybe getting it at some point. I'm not sure if I should. I would like, I don't know. I would definitely like to change things. Not change things, but to... If people just watch the ads and I bring out the videos and it's free, and the ads only appears at the time I want them to appear, which usually should be the case, which is at the beginning and at the end. And if the video is longer, then 40 minutes, also one in the middle. That is my ad policy for my videos. If you see this different in a video, it has to do with YouTube at some point changed the default setting for something. And then it happens that retrospectively it got changed for all other videos. And so it can happen that in my older videos you see more things. Wow, Orange Winter also upgrading. Now we got here the hype going on. Aren't you also subscribed to my Twitch channel already? Much appreciated, Orange Winter. But yeah, the share on the stuff, on the membership, I think is 70-30 for the creators, so it's decent. On Twitch it's 50-50, except you are partnered, then you'll get a better share, I think. And I don't know how the money thing is calculated, the ad revenue split is calculated. That could be indeed 50-50 or something like this, I don't know. But yeah, recently, I know that ads on YouTube can be really annoying. But also keep in mind that the creators can decide when an ad appears. I can't usually it's 2 ads by now, which is also a weird change. And like it's longer ago. But I can say an ad appears at the beginning, or only in the middle, or every 5 minutes. That's how often ads appear. The creator of the channel can influence. Except for videos, I don't know. There might be some weird exceptions here and there, but maybe YouTube also changed stuff. They change stuff all the time and never tell you. It's the worst thing about YouTube. But yeah, Lemon Melon said it pretty well. Especially in fantasy works, like Tolkien is just so present every time. If something is very un-Tolkien, then it's often, even then, it's a deliberate choice to maybe not to make it un-Tolkien. And sometimes it's even, yeah, no, it's just such an important work. It's really interesting. Now I also have to edit my credits again in the background. Maybe I can do this really quick. In the background before we end the stream. But yeah, the YouTube stuff is really interesting at times, but also can be quite annoying. Okay, that worked out. Just editing something here in the background really quick. I hope my computer does not melt while I'm doing this. but I will find out when I play it. The other thing about the fantasy genre is it is set in one fantasy world, and the audience ability to the genre to expand is really quite modern in the grand scheme. Yeah. Definitely. Tolkien defined so much and brought so much. We can expand to it. And many people do this. Been super busy lately. I've missed most of your streams. Yeah, no problem. Sometimes it happens. Again, thanks for all the wisdom and see you around. Yeah, thank you, Lemon Melon, for coming by and participating a bit. Stay safe too. Wish you a fantastic rest of the day. Hope to see you next time or in the comments. What if Saruman had faced the Balrog instead of Gandalf at the Bridge of Khazad-dûm? That's a really good question, I have to admit. That is a really good question, but I potentially have no good answer for. What could have been different then? That, I guess the question already implies that I don't know. No, it doesn't imply it, but we could imply that or assume for the question that that what's it called? That Saruman basically takes the role of Gandalf, so he's a good guy, not the I'm scheming in the background guy, trying to take over the world and bring my own vision of order over it. Guy that in this case. I think not much would have changed. In a way, I guess. So, I don't know. Could he... He probably got... Saruman is somebody known for his voice and talking. That is one of his featuring powers, but... I don't know. It's really hard to say. What Saruman would have done. I'm not sure how this would turned out differently, to be honest. It's such a Gandalf iconic scene in the books and in the film that it's hard to imagine somebody else being in this scene. If he's corrupted in this scenario, he maybe tries to ally with the Balrog. I don't know. We know that, for example, his voice could even convince a powerful being like the Witch King. However, a Balrog is even more powerful because it's Maiar of Morgoth, and so from the same order of being than Saruman himself. So I don't see him being able to influence the Balrog by just telling him, but maybe would have seen more dialogue between the Balrog and Saruman. I don't know. Really hard to say. Probably dies there too. Maybe he also managed to get the double KO, if you want to put it like that. Here's a random one. Which character would have been better off if they could have received advice from a character not in that timeline? That's a really hard one. I also forgot to show the last question, even though I copy-pasted it. That was the last one. Who could be better off? The question is sometimes some characters are known for getting good advice and then ignoring it, and then getting into like a lot of trouble in the world. That is definitely a thing in Tolkien's world, I would argue. And as a result, that is really hard to say, to be honest. I would pay to see Tom Bombadil fight Durin Spain. Yeah, that would be. I would also like to see that, to be honest. If fighting would be the right word. You don't mess with Tom Bombadil, even when you're a Balrog. But back to the reflective ramblings question. From another timeline. So I don't know, who would be a good candidate for this? So like in the Kalevala, me constantly shouting, just listen to the damn woman in your life, you idiot. Yes. Oh, I saw Dan, I think. Sorry. That is, yeah, it's. I think the worst decisions that people often do are from the First Age. And even then, they often got decent advice. And then never really worked out. The Men of the Mountains should have been told, careful with the oath by Maglor. Yeah, that's a good snow warning. That's a really good suggestion. Like, definitely. The Men of the White Mountains that later become the Oathbreakers, they maybe should have gotten advice from somebody, like from Maglor, for example, or from, I don't know who. Do we have good oaths in the First Age? Yeah, the Sons of Fëanor is probably, one of the Sons of Fëanor would probably pretty good at giving advice here. Yeah, Tom would either sing them to sleep or dance circles around them until they got too dizzy. Exactly, that's what would be happening. Nah. Exactly. I can see Balrog getting all sleepy and then deciding to take a nap instead. I made recently a good comparison, but I can't remember it. Where I made like a comparison, said, hey, this is actually pretty similar to how it was in the First Age. And maybe the advice would have been smarter. I guess, I don't know. I don't know, maybe the people later when Arnor was split into Arthedain, Cardolan, and Hrodaur, how to say words, getting advice, I don't know, from like Tar Palantir or something, or from, I don't know, it must be a king that is somewhat repentant, maybe even from Ar-Pharazôn, that splitting up your kingdom and getting an inner conflict in your kingdom makes you weaker against, maybe also in the maybe there are other, I guess, think of Turgon, for example, who also didn't listen to all the advice. Like, I know we need somebody who is simply consistently not listening to the good advice of others. Got to run, man. Have yourself a great night, and I'll see you guys later. Yeah, have a fantastic rest of the day or night, wherever you are. And see you next time. Thank you for joining, and also thank you for your support. Much appreciated. Something like this. Turgon was also like told multiple times, maybe leave your city, abandon the people before it's too late, and he simply would not listen. Maybe, I don't know. Something like this. Maybe Denethor could also take some advice from one of those who have suffered Morgoth in the First Age, and say, hey, maybe don't mess around with Sauron so much with your Palantir. Probably not a good idea. At the same time, you could also argue maybe the king of Arvedui, the last king of of what remains of Ars Sedine, maybe he could give advice later to, I don't know, to Gondor, for example, when they also started their civil war in the though I have to admit that Arvedui might be... Is this too late already? The Kinstrife? I think he... Wait, when was the Kinstrife? Kinstrife was 1300, right? In the Third Age. 1400, okay. 1432. When was Arvedui? Maybe I'm mixing up timelines here. It's 1800. So, okay, the people from the Kinstrife maybe should have given advice to the other dude. So it doesn't really work. I thought it would be closer together, but of course it makes no sense, right? The war against Angmar is much later. So it doesn't work. Just ignore what I just said. But yes, yeah, something like this. Really don't have a really good example, to be honest, but there are for sure some. Listen to your prophecy. Now maybe... Yeah, I don't know. Maybe the Gondorians should have listened to Arvedui as well. Like, maybe they should have listened to Isildur. The fact that your brain works at all, given your time zone, is crazy scary. Yeah, it's really early for me in the morning already, so it's easy to mix some stuff up, but... Yeah, it's getting really late, so maybe it's a good time to end the stream. I hope people are not too disappointed in it, and also... since the Balrog is a Maya, would Tom's singing really work? I get the feeling that sending... Wait away commanding a tree are a little different from affecting what is essentially a demon. That is true, but we also have like him banishing the Barrow Wights, which are of course still less powerful than a Balrog, but at least in my mind, a Tom Bombadil at full power in his own realm could be really, really powerful, even for a Balrog. But I'm not sure. That's definitely for debate. I have to admit this. Listening to prophecies or not, because self-fulfilling prophecies can get icky. Yeah, that is true. Yeah, also thank you, as a 40-year-old gamer. Thank you for joining and asking some questions here. Much appreciated. Yeah, cross universes also would probably work. Yeah, so I would say we call it a day. Because it's really late already, and I'm also a bit hungry. Let me see where it is. So, yeah, I hope you enjoyed the stream as always. I wish you all a fantastic rest of the day. Let me also, while I'm talking here, and I'm really bad at multitasking, fire up the credits. I tried to add you all. I hope I did not forget anybody in the credits. I just re-rendered them a moment ago. Where did I save them though? Okay. We have a... No, we don't have a problem. I think I found it. It's just in the wrong directory. Okay. Yeah. Let's hope the credits work. Because I just rendered them. They're fresh out of Adobe Premiere. And yeah, much shoutouts to definitely Morgoth and Reflective Rambling. I forgot to add you to moderation, Reflective Rambling. Sorry for that. But now you at least appear in the other. So shoutouts to you. Because you're actually a moderator by Indeep Geek and not here. It was just like out of an emergency situation where I needed a moderator, and I just modded you, and you helped out here. Much appreciated for that. Yeah, here you see all the nice supporters and some projects and links. I'm also sometimes work on podcast. Really needs new episodes, I know, but yeah, there's always something in the way production-wise. Still, I hope you enjoyed the stream, and I hope to stream somewhat more frequently. What kind of a powerhouse machine do you have to be able to do all this? You horrible person. Thanks for answering my question. Yeah, well, rendering while streaming is definitely bringing my processor to sweating a bit, but my computer's quite beefy, I have to admit by now. So it's able to do a lot of things, except running the starting section of Elden Ring in 60 FPS. That is not possible. But that is a fault of Elden Ring, not mine, or the fault of my computer, to be precise. Yeah, it was really fun. Next stream, like I said, I try to stream every 2 weeks, and I never make it somehow. In my mind, the last stream it was 2 weeks ago, but it is longer than that. But I have really bad stuff when it comes to time. Like I have no feeling for time sometimes, often. That's also why I'm always late when I want to start stream, but that's another story. I'm still working on the Elrond video, in case you're interested in this. About the Third Age will come in multiple parts. I won't cover the Third Age in one video. When I'm done with it, I put everything into one big video, or put the Third Age into one big video. I don't know yet. Will take some time till Elrond is complete. I'm working on some other stuff in the background too. Twitch streaming stuff, if you're into Elden Ring, I'm also doing currently an All Remembrances level 1 playthrough of Elden Ring. That's a video game that came recently out by the guys who also make Dark Souls, FromSoft, and quite fun. That you find on Twitch. And is there anything else? Not to announce yet, at least, but as said, Elrond will be next. I have some ideas. That's an interesting question. Maybe tell me in the comments if you listen to this. I made a video about the Amazon show, and there's a huge section about Tengwar, the writing system, and Kir's, the other writing system from Tolkien, in it. I know that not many people are maybe interested in the show, but it's a good explanation of how Tengwar and Kir's work. So maybe, what do you think if I would extract this from this video and put it into a separate video and just call it, "This is how Tengwar works"? Something like this. So, in case you are interested in Tolkien's writing systems, we also took a dive into this in this video, but I can understand if people don't want to watch that. So maybe tell me in the comments. Again, thank you people for watching. Have a fantastic rest of the day. See you next time. Goodbye.